Ladies, gentlemen, and miniatures of all ages, on July 29th, which is only a couple of days away from now if you're watching this video when it goes up, we have the launch of early access for Grounded 2, one of my most anticipated games of this year. The first Grounded was a fantastic game with incredible base building mechanics, a super immersive world, a fun story, and solid gameplay to back it all up, and Grounded 2 is essentially looking to try and be that exact same formula, but more and better in every conceivable way. With early access starting so soon, today I wanted to go over pretty much everything that we currently know about Grounded 2, how it differs from Grounded 1, and what to expect going on into early access. First up, get ready for some real exploration. The game was only even revealed publicly around a month and a half ago, and so while we do have some very cool stuff to talk about today, we expect there to be plenty of things that will not be revealed to the public before proper launch. That said, we've had a couple of trailers at this point, as well as a full Xbox podcast with an executive producer and the game director for Grounded 2, and there was also the inaugural Casually Grounded 2 stream done by Obsidian Entertainment themselves, which had quite a little bit of tidbits of information in it too. Starting from the top then, we are playing the same characters as we had in Grounded 1, Max, Willow, Pete, and Allie Hoops! Grounded 2 will take place in Brook Hollow Park, a new location, and with it being a park instead of a yard, expectations of scale are much larger than the first game. Specifically, the developers have said that the playable space at early access release will be similar to the finished world size of Grounded 1, the playable size today, and the expected end size by the full release of Grounded 2 is about 3 times that size, which actually lines up as well with what we know about the story so far, as the devs have stated that early access launch is essentially Act 1 of the game story-wise, so the first third of the finished product is the expectation of what we'll have at the start of early access. We have this shot showing up in the announcement trailer as like a bird's eye view of the park from a news broadcast, so it's entirely possible that this will actually just be the proper layout of the map, or at the very least we will have the more major landmarks that we can see from here, as it would be weird to give us this visual unless it was actually accurate. And for an example of why I'm saying that, this spot right here is clearly the statue that we can see from ground view in a later shot from the same trailer, the right shape and color, and that helps us give a sort of sense of scale to the park too. The statue looks this small from above the park on this main overhead view, but this big from character height level. As far as what seem like important landmarks shown in the trailers, we've got the statue already mentioned with a podium and a speaker nearby it as well. There's a big old Billy Hogg's moist and meaty hot dog stand that apparently sells 50-cent hot dogs. What a world to live in. There's what seems to be a tipped over ice cream cart or freezer of some sort with a tunnel that you enter through a cone, which is just such a cool idea, pun intended. There's a classic picnic table looking setting as well, the gingham patterned cloth, the cooler on the lower bench. Moving back to the overhead view that we get now with a bit more context, again, statue over here on the left, the Billy Hogg hot dog stand seems to be this big blue structure over here in the bottom right. The tipped over freezer with all the ice cream and stuff would seem to be this spot near here in the middle. In the story trailer, we get some more zoomed out park views as well. Here's one that shows the picnic table being close to the hot dog stand, as well as at least 3 large trees in the yard and a whole hedge line across the back too, and I would expect the hedge to be scalable and have some goodies in it if the first game is anything to go by here. Speaking of which, the podium that we mentioned earlier that is near the statue seems to be a somewhat important place. They show it from behind, tons of stuff all over it. It looks completely climbable from the bottom up, and there is a crow feather on the top as well, confirming the existence of the crow from Grounded 1, and there are also clear spider webs within the podium itself. Aside from direct locations, we see some classic Omni-Tool lab entrances looking similar to the first game. Then we see the inside of some sort of Omni-Tool facility as well. There is a lab overrun with orb weavers and ants and larvae, or potentially these are shots between multiple different facilities, and one of them even has a sign that says level 10, which implies quite the big facility to explore. And here we also see this cool pneumatic tube type Futurama style transportation system that they have in their labs here too. Right here we have an anthill. It's not really a surprise to see one of these, but it's worth mentioning that these will be returning from the first game. We've also got this shot of Pete fighting over what seems to be a hot coal, so there will be another sizzling biome style area. And prepare yourselves for this one, there's some sort of hole somewhere stuffed with rat skeletons, so that's not terrifying at all. And then we also have this big stinky trash can which seems to serve as a poisonous gas type biome as well. And then finally I want to point out the saddest thing that we see here, which is back in the announcement trailer, there is a line from the reporter that talks about the teenagers, Burgle and Dr. Tully receiving the statue. However, the following line after that is Dr. Tully and the teenagers' current whereabouts are also unknown. And seeing as she suspiciously didn't mention that Burgle's whereabouts were unknown, fans have put 2 and 2 together a little bit with this object here between the hot dog stand and the statue, which appears to be Burgle's body, without his head. Yeah, it's a bit grim, but this seems quite likely from those two things put together, and I'm pretty desperately hoping that we will have the opportunity to actually fix Burgle, and he just hasn't been brutally executed off-screen permanently. And there's even this short clip from the Xbox podcast that shows Burgle as the level map of one of the facilities, so clearly we do go inside of his body. Next up, I want to talk about the new insects. We've seen tons and tons of returning bug species in the footage so far, implying that most of the basic insects will be returning from Grounded 1. But the big exciting thing as far as I'm concerned is the properly new stuff. We've got butterflies confirmed, which is a cool extra aerial enemy, and these seem to apply a cold debuff likely related to the fresh element. We've got full-on scorpions, which I love as an enemy for the game, and there's also a caterpillar, which of course makes sense given the butterflies as well. There's a praying mantis, which we technically had a variation of as a boss in the first game, but now it seems there's just a normal, praying mantis you can just find out in the world. They are regular insects. And then there's whatever this bumpy guy is that I can only see from behind here, so we didn't get a great look, but I think it might be the same thing as this shot here, which appears to be a cockroach as a new fightable enemy as well. There's also the rat skeleton graveyard that I mentioned earlier, which maybe implies that we could either see rats, or at least something that might eat rats. Either one would honestly be pretty scary at our size in the game. As well, we mentioned a crow feather on the podium. This implies that the crow will exist again, which was just sort of an aerial entity that would drop its feathers around the map in the first game. But personally, I'm hoping there will be some kind of interaction with it past that in this game too, maybe even make it a really deep endgame boss. Then finally, this isn't an insect that we directly see at any point, but the Xbox podcast deep dive on Grounded 2 had some exclusive footage within it, and some of it was showing off some mutations. One of the mutations they showed has a requirement that says kill a tarantula, which of course implies the existence of tarantulas, and the fact that it is a 1 out of 1 unlock and that there is an actual name used in the text description of the mutation implies that there might specifically be a tarantula boss. Moving on to some larger overarching changes, big one to stop on is the concept of buggies. This is probably the biggest selling point right now for what is new, and it's a full insect riding system that lets you mount the buggies for traversal. But far more importantly, they can also do nearly everything that the player can, according to the developers, and in some cases, far more efficiently. They move faster, they have their own separate inventory that you can fill up in the field, they can fight, including being able to block and seemingly even perfect blocking, which is honestly just awesome. If you get off your buggy to explore on foot, they will follow you around and even join you in combat as a proper helper as well. They can carry stuff for you as far as planks, building materials, and not only can they carry more than the player can, but you can also do all of the actual building functions from the back of your buggy as well. On top of that, you don't have to individually collect items off of the ground one at a time either, like you normally would, because the buggies have a command where you can put them in gather mode, which just vacuums up all nearby loot from what they're saying, with an example from the developers being that this is just incredible for thistle needles. As any of my archery friends would know from the first game, well, just how irritating it was to just have to climb the whole way up a thistle plant, spamming the interact button non-stop as you collect all your thistles. But now, in theory, you can just turn on this mode on your buggy and auto-collect all the thistles nearby as you jump up on the back of this ant, which is an incredibly big deal. This is honestly just such a deep system that seems to be chock full of quality of life improvements compared to the first game. Lots of things that will just make the game feel better, and it's incredibly exciting to hear about. For the start of early access, there will be 2 buggies available specifically, which will be the red ant soldier, which they've shown a lot. This is intended to be a very sort of general purpose all-rounder buggy, which is exceptional at building as well, and the orb weaver spider as the second buggy. They've said that is a very late unlock in the current early access that will exist at launch, and while it isn't good at the building and carrying aspect of a buggy like the ant soldier is, it's supposedly much better in combat, and there are also specifically designed web pathways that are almost like bridges around the map that the orb weaver buggy can cross specifically, which is a cool extra bit of exploration that is tied to it. The developers have also stated that there will absolutely be more buggies added into the game. This is just what will be there right at the start of early access. As for the process of this, it hasn't been directly confirmed, but in the story trailer we see a specific sequence of scenes back to back of traversing into an anthill, picking up an egg from the anthill, bringing it back to some sort of built structure at your base, then sticking the egg into it, and then on the next shot they're just riding ants suddenly. So that seems pretty straightforward as an explanation for how the actual getting your buggy will work. After that, let's talk actual character gameplay outside of the buggies themselves. Couple of big changes that are very overarching. Some insects will have the ability to block your attacks, so you have to consider that as you're fighting and consider the moments that you want to actually hit them. There's also just a straight up dodge or dash mechanic now for all the player characters for just a bonus burst of movement option 2. One of the other major changes is that unlike the first game, this game will have a sort of archetype system, a very, very light character class system. The developers didn't want to have like a fully imposed character class system that you choose and then cannot change at any point in your journey or anything like that, but instead of the first game, which had very sort of vague synergies that you could create if you just understood what skills do, you could just use whatever you want at any point, and the only things you would really change are your mutations. Now, there are sort of specializations that you can branch into, where one player might be significantly better with a certain type of weapon than the others. And I don't mean based on like the team that you choose, I mean based on the decisions you've made, based on what you've done with your gameplay and what equipment you have. The 4 archetypes that they are aiming for at the start of early access are your more classic warrior type, which will either focus around big weapon smashing or like sword and board defensive style combat with a shield, with the example shown being full ladybug armor with a ladybug club and a ladybug shield. Ranger they've showed with an orb weaver armor set and an orb weaver bow, and then excitingly they've got mage as an archetype as well, tied to the candy staves, which were a relatively late unlock in the first Grounded, so I'm hoping that this implies that they'll be around quite early on. But they're wearing butterfly armor, which looks fantastic by the way, and supposedly this then synergizes with the candy staves. And then the final archetype is the rogue, and this one is shown in a spidery looking armor set. I would guess with the wolfsbane fangs being the weapon that this has, this might be wolf spider armor. But the weapons are incredibly interesting, as this is a whole new weapon type compared to the first game, which are dual wielded daggers. They've shown that the charged attack with daggers is actually a gap closing dash attack that could be quite interesting with the core gameplay, especially with the new dodge mechanic and the new blocking stuff from enemies, and these specific daggers also apply venom on hit, which is cool to see too. While these archetypes won't be things like you are locked into on character creation onwards, they've stated that there will be armor that clearly leans towards these styles, and synergies within different weapon types as well. Of course, they are also going to have mutations for each style too, which leads us into talking about the mutations that they've shown so far. Like the first game, mutations for the most part seem to come from interacting with the world. Sharpshooter, for example, is unlocked by killing enemies with bows, and from the description, this makes charged bow shots have higher crit chance, so this is clearly the ranged weapon leaning fighting style. Along with this, we can see pictures for the other fighting style mutations they've got here. We've got a fist, which should be for just punching with your hands. We've got a mace, which I imagine is for big club style weapons. We've got a guy throwing a spear, so a spear or even spear throwing focused playstyle, which is pretty fun. Then there's clearly a dagger style mutation, a sword style mutation, and the candy staff mutation. On the note of mutations, we do also see some others. Pheromone shot for seething rage from charged bow shots, whatever that specifically means. Guard dog you get from completing mixer events, which confirms that those are returning, and this gives you increased damage in defense events. Frenzy is a mutation that gives you increased damage with melee and gives you health regeneration when enraged, but reduces the timing window on perfect block. Ambush gives you a bonus on ambush attacks that is tied to yoked blows, which is the term for critical hits. This comes up again later with another crit-based mutation. Parry Master has an effect on perfect blocks that isn't specified from the description. Natural Explorer seems to be just a straight-up speed increase. And then the last one that we see here, Trapper Peeper, is just increased crit chance. Outside of this, some final notes. There is going to be an Omni-Tool that replaces all of your standard inventory filling tools like your chop, your bust, your dig, all of which will be done now from one singular item in Grounded 2, which should save you some inventory space and make things a little bit more convenient. On a similar note, the developers have said that they made this from the ground up with the intention of it being totally enjoyable without any knowledge of the first game. So if you are a brand new player to Grounded as a series, don't feel turned away if you haven't played the first game. And then finally, we know that the game will launch with difficulty settings on it as well. There will not be a custom mode at the start of early access, but it is planned to be functional later on. And we also know that friendly fire is only going to be on Whoa difficulty, which is the hard mode equivalent. And we know that there will be a creative mode option as well that you can have either with or without bugs in the world. So that is entirely up to you if you want to play the game in a little bit less standard of a way. That just about does it then, everyone. Everything that has been publicly released or announced or even just shown a little bit by the developers in relation to Grounded 2, which starts its early access in just a couple of days. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing all of you shrink down and enter the park extremely soon. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.